This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the first episode of the Fanalysts podcast, brought to you by the Fan Report, powered by Detroit Sports Podcast. I'm Nick, and joining me today and, well, for pretty much every episode for this show is going to be a good buddy of mine and my co-host on the Fan Report, Andrew.
What is
Andrew,
up?
how are you doing?
I'm excited to talk some fantasy. It's been a very up and down week one, but hopefully we can help everyone out there try to have as good a week two as possible.
It has been kind of a weird week. I mean, we had a lot of surprise injuries to start the week, and then they continued to compile from there and had a lot of game time decisions, a lot of pitch counts for a week one, that's for sure.
Do you ever remember a week one with this many injuries, by the way? Like this many bad injuries? Just
I mean,
right off the
yeah.
bat?
Don't you remember? I think it was it last year or the year before? In the offseason, we had just ACL after ACL after MCL.
Oh, yeah, I remember some bad off seasons. I do remember that.
And then it led into the week one where you're like, oh.
It feels like week one's been a massacre, though.
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot of players that go down. But just to kind of give you guys like a rundown of what we're going to do here. Obviously, with the Fan Report, it's very much a Detroit Lions / Pistons centric show. This one's a little different in the sense that it's 100% fantasy football.
Yes.
And we're not going to put any type of bias towards a Lions player. In fact, we may bias against them sometimes.
Yes. Honestly, if I'm anything, I'm biased against Lions players in fantasy.
Oh, same. But so how we're going to do things is we're going to go through the fantasy news of the week. You probably to start every single show. Maybe we'll switch it up every now and then, but we're going to go through the fantasy news, give our thoughts, give what we think could happen as a result, how it affects certain plays and your roster, who to target basically on the waiver wire. We'll probably follow right thereafter. Your weekly waiver wire targets is something that we're going to hammer down. Obviously, a big reason why we are going to be releasing this podcast on Tuesdays is so that you guys can get that waiver wire information weekly, and you can get it before your Wednesday hits, and you can listen, you get the info, and you go after the guys that you like. And then after that, we'll give our starts and sits of the week. Some weeks may just be starts, no sits. Some weeks it'll be both. And then we'll obviously give you a defense to stream as well. If there is one we like. I mean, there's going to be some weeks where there's just not a good stream defense to play, and that's just what it is. Fantasy football is a week-to-week thing, and it's constantly changing, and it's sometimes difficult.
And this week I have a few, but I don't know how many are going to be available in your leagues. That'll vary, but...
Well, in situations like that, we try to go a little bit further down. I like to put, in terms of our waiver targets.
I mean, I have at least one that I can almost guarantee is not one defense here that I guarantee is not available is available in all leagues almost.
Yes. So in the way that we do the waiver targets is we try to go after guys that are not rostered in most leagues.
Yes.
So I usually say below a 50% owned in, I'm going off Yahoo leagues in my targets today, but below 50% in most leagues, so 49 or lower. I even try to stay under 45 because 45% usually means that guy was still drafted.
Yeah. Now, we might still mention them and say, look for them in your league. They could be available, but
right.
Our key waiver wire targets are probably going to be guys that might be a little bit deeper.
And obviously, with the start sits, we avoid your obvious ones. We're not going to give you the hot top or the hot take info that Pat Mahomes needs to start week 2. Even though he does have a really bad matchup, he still needs to start.
Yep.
So we're going to give you guys a little bit more of we're going to break things down. We're going to give you in-depth analysis. We're going to try to give you and obviously we're just guys that have a lot of interest in sports and a lot of interest in fantasy sports in particular. I mean, fantasy football season's big for both Andrew and I.
We're fans first and foremost, hence the name Fanalysts on this show.
Right. And the Fan Report is our other show.
Yeah,
so we're obviously fans. We're not considering ourselves experts in any way. We just seem to have yearly success with fantasy football across several platforms, whether it be with friends, family, or randos on the internet. through FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever. And maybe even some weeks we'll give you DFS plays. I mean, that's something that we've done in the past, and it's on the Fan Report when we talked fantasy football, and it's something we can do again because
I don't know how many
play DFS.
I don't know how many of you guys out there in the same situation, but like I'm in like 3, 4, sometimes even 5 fantasy football leagues. This year, I'm actually mainly in FanDuel leagues. I have 3 FanDuel leagues.
Right, and you know what? Let's actually start this whole thing off right here by talking about this year in fantasy football, because this year is a weird year. Obviously, with the COVID situation, with the protocols that the league has, with, you know, if you mess around and don't follow the rules, we will take your money. Or if you test positive, guess what? You ain't playing. You ain't practicing. You ain't playing. Nothing. You're away from everybody.
And then there's a ripple effect on the rest of the team if you test positive too.
And then you also have the added possibility of some injuries, like we saw this week because of a shortened offseason. You have rookies that would likely have more involvement in their team early on in the season, but they don't now because they didn't have as long of an offseason.
Yeah.
You have players, and honestly, going even beyond the COVID aspect, you have players that have been very vocal about potentially sitting out games because of social justice protests, like what we saw with the NBA, where entire teams sat out games and said, we ain't playing. Well, there's a possibility of players in the NFL sitting out certain games. So obviously, you know, fantasy football this year is so different, and it's up in the air, and I know fantasy football is constantly changing on a week-to-week basis, but even more so this year, that it's like changes in bolded, big, capitalized letters this year.
Yeah.
So how are you guys handling your leagues? I know my league, my primary league that I put probably most of my energy into, we're kind of taking things as status quo. However, we've put a little bit of a hold on everybody's holding their own money this year until we determine halfway through the year, or until we see that the year gets played is basically how we're handling it. If the year doesn't end up getting played and we end up having to stop the league year, instead of him just giving everybody their money back, he's, and this is a league that's been going on for many, many years with the same people in it every single year. So it's not like a situation where we don't trust people to pay. They're going to pay. It's just whether or not we need them to because of the COVID situation. It could change and the league year may stop. But then my other leagues, they're all FanDuel leagues. Just like you said, they've all turned into weekly FanDuel leagues where you don't have to worry about your player every single week. Your roster constantly changes and you constantly have an updated roster list to choose from. So I'll just Le'Veon Bell next week decides, I mean, that's probably a bad example because I don't know how many people are playing him DFS, but say, okay, let's go with, I don't know, Mike Evans decides that, or Mike Evans catches COVID, knock on wood, he doesn't. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but you don't have to worry about him on your roster all year because guess what? Now you have an opportunity to go grab his secondary guy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that we've handled it, but I don't know how you guys have handled it. And what are your kind of expectations on how things go moving forward then?
And I will say this, I'll preface it by saying our league, my main league, we had an interesting solution this year. We kind of did a hybrid of DFS and standard ESPN league. So what we did is we set up like a FanDuel league where everyone in the league entered in, but we also did I basically ran a dummy draft. It's that just to be able to set up a schedule and stuff. And basically, we still have our head-to-head schedule each week, but your score is going to be mainly inputted by me, the commissioner, based on what you scored in FanDuel. So you're still going to have your head-to-head record. We're still going to have playoffs and a championship, but everything is going to be done through FanDuel scoring. So you're drafting your team, you're picking your team each week and doing it that way. It kind of appeased both sides of the aisle in our league because there was a lot of debate in our league about how we should handle the season.
Does FanDuel allow you to set up a league in that format?
No. So we're just doing a standard FanDuel league. And then what I'm doing is I'm inputting the scores that everybody scores each week into the ESPN league. And we have a schedule there. So based on what you scored in your ESPN league, in the FanDuel league, determines if you won your head-to-head matchup.
Interesting. Did you guys just do did you just put random players on your ESPN teams?
So what I did is I set up like an offline draft, and I just put all the same players everyone had from last year back to the draft. I just had everyone declare their keepers, and basically what we did is we extended our keeper deadline. So basically, in our league, all keepers expire after 2 years. So we made it 3 years. That way you don't lose out on your keeper, but the keeper clock's still ticking in terms of what round you get them in. But so we had everyone declare their keepers, and then I just that way we don't need to like draft or anything. And then obviously people were like, can we draft just to have keepers, like to draft some keepers for next year? And we're like, we're not going to draft just for keepers.
No, because it's not your player this year. You know what I mean? That's not your player this year because you're playing the DFS. So it's a lot more. It obviously sounds like a lot more legwork for you, and I kind of like this idea.
The heavy legwork's done. Now it's just me inputting scores every week.
I mean, fair enough. Obviously, but it sounds like that's kind of a really solid medium to go by is continue your head-to-head matchups and everything just to get it going that way. And but you don't have to worry about the yearly roster aspect of things. So basically you're taking your keepers just carry over to next year is what they're going to do.
Exactly.
Now, my question is when do they have to declare their keepers by? Because what happens?
We already have them declared before the start of the season.
That's kind of
you're not like tied to it. It's like you have the right to keep that player next year. If you don't want that keeper next year, you don't have to keep them. But that by declaring them before the start of the season, you basically have given yourself the right to keep them at a certain round.
So let me ask you this then: what if someone decided to keep? Let's throw DJ Chark out for example, and they got him. They didn't draft him. So depending on how your league handles the waiver pickups in terms of keepers, fifth round. Okay, so say they wanted to keep him in the 5th round going for next year. What if he tears his ACL in week 14 or something and ends up having to miss the next half of the season? Do they?
That was a discussion that we had in our league, and that's the risk you run with the keeper. So we're not going to let you switch your keeper after the season, because it's not like we drafted anybody. It's not like you had a draft. So you have your keeper from your last. You basically be allowing someone to keep a keeper from 2 years ago. So basically, if you declared your keeper and the keeper got hurt, you're out of luck there.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's an interesting thought process, an interesting way to do things. Obviously, going through a whole draft would be just to declare keepers would be kind of stupid, because then the whole draft at that point would be screwed up. Exactly. I mean, you'd be looking at people drafting.
Keepers would be overvalued in the draft.
Right. Guys who would be totally overvalued because of where they want to keep them, which already in a keeper league, guys who are your standard keeper picks already are overvalued, but that would just make it even more. Yeah. A guy like DJ Chark, who probably, he's a bad example because he already is going in high rounds, but a guy like Alexander Madison, who's probably going later on in drafts, in a lot of drafts, would end up probably jumping up 2, 3, 4 rounds. It would screw up all the ADPs at that point. But I guess, I don't know. I don't know, because if I were that guy that ended up keeping a guy and he tears his ACL week 14, I'd be pretty pissed that I no longer get my keeper at that point. My roster just screwed up for next season. Obviously, he doesn't have to keep him at that point. He can say no when he gets his draft pick back. It would just kind of suck. But I guess if you got to make things fair, and you got to put a line in the sand and say this is where things are and this is how things are going to go. So you got to do what you got to do. And I don't really know what the best way to handle that would be. And sounds like,
but in terms of what I'm expecting for fantasy football this year, we wouldn't be taking all these measures if we weren't anticipating some type of volatility. Like you look at the MLB and how, at least at the start of the season, how many teams had to cancel games and how many players had to miss games. And you worry about that same scenario happening in the NFL. So we didn't want to have a season that would be that'd be tainted by something like that. So that's why. So I know a lot of leagues are doing it where they're switching to FanDuel entirely or trying to find some kind of way to mitigate that risk.
I mean, if something like that were to happen, you'd eternally have to put an asterisk up for this league year, and you don't ever want to have to do that. At least the way you're doing it, the only way you would have to put an asterisk up is if you weren't able to finish the season. Now, if you going back to, and you mentioned something about how Major League Baseball and how volatile that situation was early on in the year, I will say this: they haven't had an issue since.
Yeah, that's what I said early on because I haven't heard anything.
And in all honesty, that's kind of made me feel a lot better about the NFL season, not upcoming.
Yeah.
It's happening now, about the NFL season, because baseball was able to figure it out. They were able to figure out not using a bubble to have their season without further issues than they already had. They hit the bumps in the road. They had to figure that out. Now they're going to have to figure out how to handle the playoff situation, because you have teams that have played more games than others by the end of this. Because you're not going to be able to make up all the games some of these teams missed. It's just a fact. You don't have time. So you're going to have to figure out how to seed the playoffs and who gets in, who doesn't with the wild cards. But that's something that they're going to just have to figure out. However, the fact that they haven't really had many issues since the whole situation with the Cardinals and the Marlins and all that, and they figured out what the cause of it was, which was players' stupidity and staff stupidity, going out to a strip club, going to the casinos, blah blah blah. They figured it out, and they've it hasn't really happened since. And the NFL is pretty much, from everything I've heard, been very clear about their expectations, very clear about what's going to happen if you do go out and screw up. If you do go to a strip club or go to the bar or go to the casino and end up catching COVID, even if you don't catch COVID, if you just do it, they will take your money. You will be fined, and it's not going to feel good.
It's not going to be pretty.
No. And you know what? Great. Because at this point, if that's what the rule states, that's how it should be. And if they need to keep the integrity of the league year at the absolute highest it possibly can be, that's what they got to do. They got to be strict about it.
Yeah.
So, but if they are, and if players follow the rules that are set in front of them, then I seeing how the baseball season has turned out, I don't think I'm all that worried about the NFL season coming up. Now, obviously, things can change if we have a second massive wave of the whole thing, but we'll find out. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, but let's go ahead and get into some fantasy news here.
Let's do it.
Go ahead and take it away.
All right. So the first big piece of news is, and this is probably the earliest thing that happened, was Marlon Mack went down with a torn Achilles, kind of paving the way for Jonathan Taylor to take over that backfield, or so we thought. But it was a Nyheim Hines party. Nicholas, what do you make of the backfield with Marlon Mack out for the season? Are you all on the Jonathan Taylor bandwagon?
Well, let me first say that I feel bad for Marlon Mack, even though it was a situation where it kind of looked like he was being pushed out the door a little bit after the end of last season and coming into this season.
He was balling. He was doing real well in the game before he got hurt, and reports out of training camp where he was really giving Jonathan. He was not going to let John Taylor take a spot easy. He was really giving his all,
but the Colts were willing to give every chance to Jonathan Taylor to take that job.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, my thought process behind this is I think early on in the season, Jonathan Taylor may not be your number one guy on that team. And it has everything to do with the fact that he's probably just not 100% ready yet. He had a shortened offseason, a shortened training camp. He wasn't given enough time to learn the system, learn the NFL way of life, learn how to play NFL football, how to play pro football. And there is a steep learning curve jumping from college to the pros that a lot of guys don't just pick up right away. Even after a full offseason, he had a shortened one. So I think this is just the Colts using Nyheim Hines to buy Jonathan Taylor some time to get comfortable and get used to everything and learn everything he needs to before I think it eventually will. And it probably will be a gradual shift, but you will see an uptick in Jonathan Taylor usage week to week. But however, right here, right now, Nyheim Hines probably is the guy. And he probably is someone you need to look at early on in the season. And you'll see my full thoughts about it in a little bit here. But eventually, though, I'm not worried if I'm a Jonathan Taylor owner. In fact, I'm ecstatic right now if I'm a Jonathan Taylor owner. And I know you don't want to be ecstatic about someone else's injury, but if I'm a Jonathan Taylor owner, I'm looking at this as a gold mine. Not right now so much, but later on in the year.
I'll start by saying, Nyheim Hines doing what he did in week one, I think you're going to kind of see more of the same. Obviously not going to get 2 touchdowns every week, but I've been screaming Nyheim Hines' names in the rooftops even before, during
even
draft
before
season.
this year.
just because we know how much Phil Rivers loves his pass catching backs. So there's no doubt in my mind that Nyheim Hines is going to continue to be productive, but I do expect Jonathan Taylor to come in right away and take charge of that backfield. Frank Reich, the Colts head coach, at least he said he believes that John Taylor is ready and he'll step up and do a good job. I hope it's not just coach speak.
I was going to say that could very well be coach speak. And I'm purely just going based off of the fact of what we've seen from some of the other rookie running backs.
Yeah.
That they just haven't had enough time to get ready. Mm-hmm. And that's my whole thought process with Jonathan Taylor and why they didn't go to him as much in week 1 as they could have. And shouldered the load on Nyheim Hines.
Yeah, cause it was weird because when that happened, you did expect John Taylor to get a slew of touches, but he didn't really. And then the touches he got, he didn't really do much with. So my question to you is, assuming Jonathan Taylor becomes the lead back in this backfield, let's say he gets 15 to 20 carries a game. Are you putting him in RB1 range, or is he kind of a solid RB2?
No, not quite. And this mainly because Nyheim Hines is still going to play an impact in this offense. Mm-hmm. Still going to have a pretty large role, and especially in the passing downs, you're going to see more Nyheim Hines than Jonathan Taylor. I know the Colts offensive line is elite level, but I still expect Nyheim Hines to play a little bit more of a role to keep Jonathan Taylor down. 15, 20 touches is good, but it's all about what he does with them and whether or not he gets the goal line touches, whether or not he's going to have some touchdowns vultured. There is going to be a cap on what he can do because of the presence of Nyheim Hines, who's going to get 5-ish carries a game, plus however many balls he's going to catch there in the game throughout the game as well. Because, like you mentioned, Philip Rivers does love his pass catching backs a lot, and you saw that last year with the Chargers and Austin Eckler, and you're going to see that again this year with Nyheim Hines, and that may end up causing Nyheim Hines to have an uptick in snaps as well. So
yeah.
I do expect Jonathan Taylor to be good to have an ability to reach RB1 status in some weeks, especially on a good matchup. But I think a majority of the year, you'll see him hover around a mid RB2. He's got the talent. I just don't know that he's going to fully get the usage to get up there. Especially in PPR leagues. Standard leagues, he may have a little bit of a bump, but I think in PPR leagues is where you'll see his potential kind of capped.
Yeah, right now I have him pegged with having total control of the backfield, I have him pegged as a high-end RB2 for me. That's kind of where I put him.
That's fair.
All right, another running back that went down, Le'Veon Bell, went down with a hamstring injury. Something interesting I learned, by the way, was Adam Gase was apparently mad at himself because Bell came out with that hamstring injury, and then Gase put him back in the game, which made it worse. If you need any more reason.
Is that a fireable offense? A guy is injured, you just say, screw it, go play? I mean,
I would think so.
It's week 1. I understand doing that when it's, you're fighting for a wild card spot or fighting for the division in week 16. I get that. That's different. This is week 1 we're talking about here.
Yeah. But Bell will, according to Adam Gase, Bell will probably be out a couple of weeks. But the question is, are you rushing to add reliable Frank Gore, or are you just kind of ignore this backfield entirely?
I'm ignoring the Jets backfield entirely. I know Frank Gore is a solid player and he's a future Hall of Famer, but I mean, what's Frank Gore done in the last few years now? Has he ever been really fantasy relevant on any given week? Plus, Le'Veon Bell wasn't even very good last year with the Jets. What makes you think a lesser back in pushing 40 or seemingly pushing 40 is going to be any better with this Jets offense? And I don't think the Jets offense is one that I'm really paying too much attention to, especially not in the running back room. So I'm just going to stay away and look elsewhere to grab someone on the waiver wire if I need to, or via trade or whatever. But I'm staying away from Frank Gore. That's not my top guy right there.
I agree. I'd pick up Frank Gore if you're just desperate for a running back. If you don't have someone that you can rely on to start, he'd be a solid couple week streamer. But it's I'm not expecting much out of this Jets backfield. I wasn't expecting much out of Le'Veon, so I'm not. Why would I expect much out of Frank Gore? Moving on to Blake Jarwin, who tore his ACL. He was a big sleeper tight end target for a lot of people coming into the season. He was replaced by Dalton Schultz during the game. However, Schultz is not nearly as good. He's slower, doesn't have as good of hands. Is Schultz a target, or are you just praying that the Cowboys pick up someone off free agency?
I'm in the boat that believes that the Cowboys are going to be looking for another tight end. They obviously, for for decades, we'll call it decades, have had a high level pass catching tight end in Jason Witten, and they're going to look for somebody along those lines. They need somebody. The tight end is a big part of their offense. So they're going to need somebody to fill that role. Obviously, this may mean an uptick in if they have a blocking guy, that they throw in at tight end. It may help Zeke Elliott out a little bit. But if I'm a Blake Jarwin owner, I'm hoping the Cowboys go and grab somebody as opposed to one of those guys. I don't think they're going to move the needle on a week-to-week basis very much at all. I definitely think they're going to have to find someone in free agency.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he's going to move. And if they do go with him, he's not someone that's going to move the needle for me in terms of picking him up. He
may have one big week, and then the next week you see the waiver wire, percentage go way up on him, and he gets grabbed by somebody, and then the very next week you could see him put up 2 points.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be one of those situations.
All right, and then one that just happened. So we're recording this on Monday night right after the Pittsburgh New York Giants game. James Conner went down with an ankle injury, but Benny Snell looked real good in his stead. And a lot of people are wondering, is he a threat to take James Conner's job? Now, for those of you who didn't watch the game, Benny Snell carried the ball 19 times for 113 yards. How high are you on Benny Snell right now?
How many people are actually surprised by this? Because we saw this last season. It's seemingly every single year the lead back in Pittsburgh goes down, the very next guy up is still really effective. And then even if he goes down, the guy following him is really effective. Yeah. The Pittsburgh Steelers just utilize their backs in a way and make that it just makes things happen. Any back they throw back there has been effective year after year after year. So, of course, Benny Snell is a guy I'm looking to target right now. If James Conner is going to be missing any kind of time whatsoever, Benny Snell's a guy you got to add immediately. You got to fight for him. Use that high waiver priority if you need to. If you need a running back for next week, because, like I said, and we saw this last year, this isn't a fluke thing with Benny Snell. He was good in spots last year when James Conner went down to the point where people were arguing that James Conner shouldn't have the job anymore because he was at times inconsistent.
Yeah, James Conner was nowhere near the person he was 2 years ago last year, and in those 10 games that he played. And then today, before he got hurt, he had 6 carries for 9 yards, like nothing.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think that Benny Snell is a threat to, even if this James Conner injury doesn't end up being serious, I think that Benny Snell is a serious threat to take a stranglehold in this backfield. All right, and then do you have any other injuries that I missed?
Those were pretty much the list. Big ones that I could think of. I'm probably missing one or two, and if we are, well...
We had George Kittle sprained his knee, which
what's the prognosis on that? I didn't think that was all that serious.
They haven't said anything. It's unclear if he's going to be active for week 2 or not. They have Jordan Reed behind him.
Well, I mean that's what's tough about.
You know how long he'll stay healthy,
right? That's what's tough about an early week podcast, though. When it comes to injuries that may or may not cause someone to miss some time, it's tough early week because you obviously Tuesday's their off day. So you don't know if he's going to be practicing this week or what, does he limited practice early on and act full participation late, no practice to limited to questionable going into the weekend. So it's kind of tough to gauge that. But George Kittle's a guy that I'm pretty sure has played hurt in the past, and he's obviously a really tough guy. So I don't know if he's going to miss any time there, but we'll see.
If he does miss like a game or two, Jordan Reed is a great sleeper. Streamer target.
He actually really is, because he's been effective in the past, and
he's effective when he plays. That's when he plays. He's usually pretty good.
It just doesn't happen often because he doesn't often play.
All right, that's going to lead us right into our waivers, though, and we'll start with someone we were just talking about here, and that's Benny Snell. So, again, he's owned in 14% of IUCBS leagues for these. 16 carries that was an old stat, but 19 carries for 113 yards. I think he is my top priority waiver ad this week.
I can't disagree with you whatsoever. Benny Snell, like I said, this is a guy who was effective last year when he was handed the job, and I don't have any reason to believe otherwise. He's a good running back that has proven an ability to play well. So I think in James Conner's absence, Benny Snell's a guy that you can plug in there, especially if you're a James Conner owner. But he's a guy you can plug in there and have him be effective for you as RB2. As an RB2 on a week-to-week basis. As long as he gets the opportunities, he's going to be effective.
Yeah.
My guy that I want to mention, it is also someone we just mentioned not too long ago. It's Nyheim Hines, the running back for the Colts. He's 17% owned as of right now, as far as I know, in Yahoo leagues. He is the guy that they kind of turned to when Marlon Mack went down. He got a lot of opportunities in that game. And this just means that, and obviously, like you mentioned, Philip Rivers loves his pass catching back. So this is a guy who's going to have an uptick in his workload on a exponential basis almost, to the point where you could look at him, especially in PPR leagues. He's a guy that I think needs to be rostered in pretty much every league out there. And he probably even has some standard league potential or upside there as well, just because of the fact that his usage is going to go way up, at least for the time being.
Yeah, he's in my one standard league I have. He's already on my roster. So
fair enough.
But
I do have another.
So you know where I stand. I'm picking him up.
I do have another running back. If you do not,
I do. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Adrian Peterson, 30% owned in CBS leagues. He had 14 carries, 96 yards. Kerryon Johnson was non-existent. I don't see anyone contesting him for the lead lion's share of carries in his backfield right now.
Not right now.
So if you're in need of a running back, I think AP may give you some consistent production, at least for the first half of the season.
Now, here's one that I'm going to throw out there that I'm just very curious by, because he's a guy who he's not like a younger guy. He's not, he's been around the league for a little while. It's Malcolm Brown, running back for the Rams.
Yeah.
25% owned in Yahoo, and he apparently is the lead back in LA.
Yeah, people were wondering, was it going to be him or Cam Akers? And I think he fully outperformed Cam Akers.
He outperformed and outtouched Cam Akers in that game.
Yep.
18 carries for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Malcolm Brown has proven to be the guy there, at least early on in the season, until he loses that job. So if you don't have him on your roster, that's a guy I'd be looking at also.
It's not the way I expected that one to go. I was on the Cam Akers train. I normally side with the younger players when there's a position battle. So I never anticipate just the veteran winning out. I'm always like, the younger guy, fresher legs, he's going to win out.
Absolutely.
Doesn't look like it.
One guy I would want to look at adding as a handcuff, and this is pretty much more of a handcuff situation, is Chase Edmonds, the running back for the Cardinals. Obviously, we saw what he could do last year, but he's very obviously the clear second back behind Kenyon Drake, but he does have some upside there, especially if Kenyon Drake goes down with an injury of any kind. So that's a guy I would look at as well. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen. I have Kenyon Drake in a couple leagues. But Chase Edmonds is a guy I would definitely be looking at.
And then I would just check your waiver wires if he is available. He's owned in currently on 67% of leagues, so he's owned in most leagues, but not like a vast majority. Jags running back James Robinson. He got picked up. I noticed he got picked up quite a bit on Thursday this week. But 16 carries, 62 yards. He was the lead back out of that backfield.
Yeah, much to my dismay, Chris Thompson.
Yeah, and what was weird is Laviska Shenault looked like he was getting more of those pass catching downs than Chris Thompson was, which I was not expecting.
I will be getting to him in a minute.
Yeah. Well, so I would check your waivers. If James Robinson's there, I would give him a look for sure.
You know what? I'm going to move right into wide receivers here, and I'm going to start off with Laviska Shenault. He's a guy who is owned in only 7% of Yahoo leagues. He was productive week 3. He had 3 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown. I expect the usage for him to actually go up, and the reason is because he is a versatile playmaker. He's a guy who can split out wide as well as come out of the backfield, and he's going to get a lot of pass catching downs out of the backfield as well. I'm looking at something else, but he's also got something that is really intriguing to me about him is he's got a very favorable matchup or bunch of matchups coming up at the Titans, home against the Dolphins, at the Bengals, at the Texans, and home against the Lions. Those are excellent matchups for Laviska Shenault. And he's looking like a guy that's going to get more of an opportunity the more as long as he continues to be reliable and productive. So if you see those numbers continue to stay steady, he's going to get more and more of an opportunity in that offense, because that's an offense that's that desperately needs playmakers, and he definitely has the possibility to be one.
My other wide receiver waiver target, and he's going to be more of just like a few week streamer, is Scotty Miller out of Tampa. He had 5 catches for 73 yards, and as we know, Mike Evans already hurt, and Chris Godwin suffered a head injury during the game. Unsure the status of that, but Scotty Miller was productive in their stead, so I would give him a look if he's available in your league, and especially if you are a Tampa wide receiver owner. This is a guy who you can slot in just till they get healthy again.
I actually have him on my list as well, and it has to do a lot with the fact that he's pretty much cemented himself in the third wide receiver spot for the Bucs, and we know that Brady loves his number 3s. We know that he loves
that
his guys
is true
in the slot.
as
So
well.
he may be a guy that actually does have potential beyond the returns of Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So Scotty Miller may be a guy to look at. My next guy to target in the waiver at wide receiver is Russell Gage, the wide receiver for the Falcons. He is quite literally 0% owned in Yahoo leagues. Nobody expected this one. Yeah. Nobody. Obviously. Nope. Obviously. He had a monster week with 9 catches on 12 targets for 114 yards. And in that offense that obviously likes to throw the football a lot in Atlanta, he kind of became a big-time target for Matt Ryan there. And I don't expect this to change, because it isn't like Julio or Calvin Ridley didn't get targets, because they did too. Yeah. So I think Russell Gage has a big-time opportunity to continue to see his workload up there and be a factor in this offense. So there's a guy I'd look at it to have a possibly good year. Is there a floor, a very low floor? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but I do think as long as his opportunities continue to come and the ball gets thrown his way, he obviously does a lot with it. So I think it's someone you can take a look at.
And I do have a tight end target for those of you that did lose Blake Jarwin or maybe
more
George
wide
Kittle.
Receiver targets.
Oh, you have more wide receivers. I had 2. I had Laviska Shenault and Scotty Miller. Those were my 2.
Well, I'm sorry.
Keep it going.
Yours then. My next one is actually Curtis Samuel, the wide receiver for the Panthers, 31% owned in Yahoo leagues. He led his team in catches and yards this week, and he's got big play potential. He broke a big one this week, in fact. And the thing about, and I know he's not the number 1 in Carolina, but he probably is more the number 2 or 3 option. But the thing I like about the secondary options in Carolina is Teddy Bridgewater loves to spread the ball around. And I mean loves to. I believe he threw at least 8 balls to almost all of his receivers in this game. And I don't expect that to change, because Teddy Bridgewater's always likes to spread the ball around. So where I think that hurts DJ Moore's possibility of the ceiling, it helps the floors of guys like Curtis Samuel. So I think that's a guy to take a look at. And the other one I have is Mike Williams, wide receiver for the Chargers, 41% owned. Tyrod Taylor showed this week that he likes Mike Williams, especially on the long balls out wide. So there's a guy, whenever you have a big play potential out wide on a team that likes to throw the football a little bit, that's a guy you're going to want to look for.
Mike Williams is the guy I was really worried about going into the season, because he did have a productive year last year, but I was worried about the connection between him and Tyrod Taylor, because I don't really trust Tyrod Taylor.
I was too, but Tyrod Taylor seemed to trust him a little bit, and it worked out. He likes throwing the long ball outside, and Mike Williams is obviously the guy that's going to get a bulk of those targets. So, but go ahead and give me the tight end waiver target. I don't have one. I'm not going to lie to you. I
have one for you. And he's available in almost all leagues, and that is Logan Thomas out of Washington.
That was the one I was going to possibly do, but I wasn't sure.
The reason I put him in is because he was their most targeted pass catcher in this game. He caught 8 balls for him. He was targeted 8 times. He played 52 out of 70 snaps. Had 4 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown. So he seems to be very, very highly involved in this offense, which that's really all you can ask for the tight end. Just to give you the opportunity to get some catches and some production. So Logan Thomas, if you lost Blake Jarwin, I would take a good long hard look at picking up Logan Thomas.
Absolutely. If it's like you mentioned, if it's a tight end, he gets a lot of opportunities in the offense. That's really the best way to gauge how a tight end is going to perform throughout the season is how many targets are they getting, how many snaps are they playing, do they use them in multiple different situations? Because the more the guy plays, the more opportunity he's going to get to score for you. So
because there's only so many like elite level tight ends. Like after that, it's all about opportunity. So
yeah, there's only a few. So let's go on and switch on over to the starts and sits of the week.
Yes, sir.
Before we close things out here. Let's start it off with quarterbacks. My number one guy. And this is a guy who in years past was arguably the best quarterback in fantasy football. He was a guy that was always on rosters. This year, things are changed because, well, he just wasn't that good the last couple of years. And it's Aaron Rodgers for the Packers going up against the Lions. The Lions made Mitch Trubisky look like a future MVP. I can only imagine what Aaron Rodgers is going to do to that team after what I saw from him this past week. So and especially with a secondary that had Justin Coleman go down as well. I'm a little bit concerned for my Lions here because Aaron Rodgers may put up 100 on them.
Oh Jesus. I'm with you on the Aaron Rodgers. That was my top target as well. The next guy though is Josh Allen going against Miami. Josh Allen had a really good outing in week 1, and it really comes down to the fact that this Miami defense is not anything to be afraid of. And I think that Josh Allen is going to do just as well as he did in week 1, in week 2, going against Miami. I think he's an easy play.
I said it before, I said it a while back, and I'll say it again. I think Josh Allen's a guy that has a lot of potential this year in terms of fantasy. I like that Bills team this year. I ain't going to lie. Yeah. My second guy here is more of a streaming option. It's a guy where if you really don't like your matchup with your top guy, and you have this guy or he's available to you, I would take a look at him just because of the matchup. And he is a guy who is likely drafted in most leagues, but, maybe not, especially maybe not after this week because he did not perform all that well this week. But it's Baker Mayfield for the Browns going up against Cincy. Cincy's defense, or Cincy as a whole, is just not a good football team. And whenever you're going up against a rookie quarterback, there's obviously the potential for turnovers, which means good field position for your quarterback. So I like Baker Mayfield this week going up against the Bengals just because of the fact that it's another year for him. And I know he didn't play that well this week, but it's another year for him under his head coach and offensive coordinator. He's got that experience now there with those guys. And I hope I see a bounce back week for Baker Mayfield and the Browns coming here. So that's a guy that I would at least take a look at.
My one sit at quarterback is Carson Wentz going against the Rams. The Rams on Sunday night, they really slowed down that Cowboys offense, and Dak Prescott was not his usual self, only throwing 64% completion rating, 266 yards, 1 touchdown. A very conservative stat line for Dak Prescott, and not to mention Carson Wentz wasn't all that great in week 1 either.
No, he really wasn't. But I
have no confidence in Carson Wentz this matchup, so I would straight up look for a different option here.
Carson Wentz was my number one sit of the week also. I don't expect much from him going up against the Rams. It's a pretty tough matchup. My next sit of the week, though, I do have one more, and this may not even be a guy you'd look at playing anyways, but I hate his matchup, and it's Ben Roethlisberger going up against Broncos. Broncos defense is good. Ben Roethlisberger is still yet to prove he's still got it to me.
Yeah.
So
I had that I had that down and I took it off because I was like, I kind of want to wait to see what the Broncos do tonight. Like I was like, I don't know how confident I feel in saying sit Ben Roethlisberger because he looked real good tonight. Ben Roethlisberger.
He did.
So I was like, I kind of want to wait to see what the Broncos do. I'm curious what the update is. But moving on to running backs, my start of the week is Kenyon Drake versus.
Oh yeah, you took it.
You took mine for quarterback. Just payback, baby. I mean, I don't know how much I need to explain this. Washington gets torn up on the daily, and Kenyon Drake is a crucial part of that Arizona offense.
We saw what he could do last year with the Cardinals.
Exactly. And the Cardinals have only gotten better through the air, which means he'll only be better on the ground. It's an easy play.
So I've got one that is a little bit more interesting, and it's because I'm going with a must start for two guys in the same team at the running back position in their matchup, but I'm not going to name the number one guy because he's an RB1 pretty much every week. It's Kareem Hunt going up against the Bengals. Kareem Hunt in his opportunities last year was extremely good, and he actually, I believe, if I remember right, outplayed or had more opportunities or more touches or more snaps or something like that towards the end of last season than Nick Chubb did. Obviously, like both this week, and Kareem Hunt, obviously, he's a guy who needs to get more opportunity, and I think the Browns are going to give him that chance this week going up against the Bengals. So I like Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb this week against the Bengals.
Ooh, going for the twofer. My next start of the week at running back is Ronald Jones against the Panthers. Josh Jacobs absolutely tore him a new one on the ground on Sunday.
You don't think
Ronald
Leonard Fournette gets the job?
So far, no. Ronald Jones actually looked halfway decent last week for Tampa. Leonard Fournette, not so much. It's like a yard of carry.
I know.
So yeah, I kind of like Ronald Jones to step it up even further against the Panthers that looked very, very vulnerable against the run. They lost a ton of key linebackers during the offseason, which is why Josh Jacobs was able to do what he did to him. And I'm playing Ronald Jones this week.
So let's switch it over to sits of the week. I've got a couple here. I'm going to go with Cam Akers against the Eagles. Cam Akers obviously isn't even the lead back in LA right now. And on top of that, the Eagles D-line is pretty damn good. So I'm not looking at Cam Akers to be very effective this week. I don't like the matchup, and I don't even know what kind of workload he's going to get. It's too volatile there for me to really put my faith in a guy like that right now.
Yeah.
Who do you have any sits for the running backs?
Yeah. This is not so much to sit, more of I won't pay up for him in terms of like a DFS standpoint, and that is Josh Jacobs.
I was literally going to put that. Well, I actually have that here, but
and he's going against the Saints, who have a very stout defense. Now, again, I just mentioned Ronald Jones, 17 for 66. That was the lead rusher for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Leonard Fournette was not good.
Yeah, that was a 3.9 yard per carry average. I could expect Josh Jacobs to give you like 20 carries for maybe 90 yards. But I could definitely see the Saints keeping him out of the end zone, which means he's probably not going to be worth the value because he's probably going to cost you north of 85.
I was going to say in my opinion, the only way you get big time point totals out of a guy like Josh Jacobs this week is if he scores. And whenever you're touchdown reliant on a running back, that isn't always a good thing to have, especially in DFS plays.
Exactly.
Switching on over to wide receivers here. My start of the week is going to be Allen Robinson going up against the Giants.
Took mine. That's what I got.
Nice.
We're on the same wavelength.
We are. Allen Robinson or Mitch Trubisky and the Bears. Obviously, Trubisky's going to be playing as your number one quarterback going into this week because of the way he played this week. And he obviously looks connected with Allen Robinson. And the Giants' defense is just hot garbage. Allen Robinson is going to probably be wide open a majority of this game, and
Pittsburgh
I expect
tore him up today. So
yeah, I expect big numbers out of Allen Robinson this week.
I agree. But I guess my second start of the week, and I kind of took a page out of your playbook. I'm going the duo of Stephon Diggs and John Brown. They were both pretty damn good this week against the Jets. Stephon Diggs had 8 catches for 86 yards. John Brown, 6 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. And they're going against the Dolphins, who, again, I don't know how many times I need to say this, are not good.
Really?
So it basically goes along with that Josh Allen start of the week. He's got to have someone throw to, and I really like those two guys. So I'm comfortable playing either from them.
Does Josh Allen actually need someone to throw to? Because I would argue he's a better runner than he is a passer. I don't even need to argue that. It's a fact.
And Cam Newton got 75 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns against that team. So if that's any indication, it just strengthens Josh Allen's start of the week.
I've got one more here, and it actually is more of a duo, but I'm going to lean on one guy. It is DJ Moore going up against the Bucs. The Bucs.
And he let me down this week.
He did, and I actually blame Curtis Samuel for that. But I like both DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel this week. I don't think the Bucs secondary is all that great. And there's going to be probably a lot of passing coming out of Carolina in this game. just because of the fact that it may be a shootout due to how good the Bucks offense is.
Mm-hmm.
I like DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel this week for the Panthers.
Okay. I have one sit of the week for a wide receiver. That's going to be Will Fuller against Baltimore. Baltimore, in my opinion, is the best secondary in the NFL. And Will Fuller is a deep ball reliant, although productive when on, he's a deep ball reliant wide receiver. I am not comfortable relying on him getting that deep touchdown against the Baltimore Ravens. I'm sitting Will Fuller this week.
I've got a couple of guys I don't necessarily love. They may be guys that you're forced to play just of who they are. I just don't love their matchup, but it's Juju Smith-Schuster going up against the Broncos. Broncos defense is just good, and Juju, he wasn't very good last year. So we'll see what he does this year, but I don't love his matchup going against the Broncos. The other one is Calvin Ridley against the Cowboys. Cowboys defense is obviously good as well, but the other thing with Calvin Ridley is apparently Matt Ryan loves this new guy in Russell Gage. And I know that I believe 4 players actually saw 8+ targets for Atlanta this week. I could be wrong on that. That might have been a different matchup. But if another player continues to emerge in that offense, I would think Calvin Ridley's the guy that has the downtick in targets, not Julio Jones. So my expectations are a little bit hampered by the presence of Russell Gage as well as the Cowboys defense this week or coming up this week.
Yeah.
Tight ends, I have Jared Cook going up against the Raiders.
That's me.
The Raiders defense just isn't very good against tight ends, and Jared Cook is a guy who Drew Brees obviously trusts. So I think Cook has a big opportunity to put up some big totals this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jared Cook went 5 for 80 yards. And I again, it's only week 2, but I don't. Even though the Raiders limited Ian Thomas to 2 catches for 16 yards, I kind of blame that right now more on the Panthers' offense than anything. They didn't really go to the tight end much. I still don't trust the Raiders in terms of carving the tight end. And Jared Cook looked great. Yeah,
I also think the caliber of tight end between Ian Thomas and Jared Cook is quite different.
I agree with you there. I guess I'll jump to my tight end sit unless you know where to start.
No, I mean, a guy I would look at is Hayden Hurst against Cowboys. Cowboys' one weakness on defense is covering tight ends.
Oh,
there it is.
My sit, and this is assuming he plays, is George Kittle. Because of the fact that a bad matchup, and if he does play, he's playing with a knee sprain.
Yep.
So, again, if you have George Kittle, you probably don't have a second tight end. You're probably just rolling with George Kittle, so you don't have a choice. But in DFS, don't even think about paying up for George Kittle.
Nope. And that actually was my set of the week at tight end as well. Defenses to look at to stream possibly. Mm-hmm. I've got 2 actually. I've got the Broncos for 1. They've kind of moved down the pecking order for defenses this year because of the loss of Von Miller, but they do have a good matchup this week. So I would look to grab them.
I can't believe I'm saying this. This is the second time I've said I can't believe I'm saying this, but I can't believe I'm going to recommend to start the Browns defense.
That was my next one.
Cincinnati did not look great on offense on Sunday.
Didn't.
And Browns are more likely than not to be available in your league. I would definitely pick up the Browns defense.
Absolutely.
That's a really good cheap DFS play if you're looking for a DFS defense.
Definitely. And anytime you're going up against a rookie quarterback, turnovers are possible and likely probable.
Yeah.
So
2 that may or may not be available. I don't know. Do you have any more defensive?
Nope, that was it.
I was going to say Seahawks at New England and Bears versus the Giants. Oh, really are 2.
Both good matchups.
Yeah, both really good matchups. Bears are still a really good defense going against a terrible offense, in my opinion, in the Giants. And the Seahawks going against New England, again, a really good defense going against what I believe to not be a very good offense in New England.
Yep. All righty. Well, that pretty much covers it for this week, guys. Thank you again for listening. Andrew, do you have anything else to add?
I will say that if you guys have any specific fantasy football questions, hit us up on Twitter at Real Fan Report.
Yeah, you can find us there. I don't know if... we'll talk about it later on. But thank you guys again for listening. You will catch us weekly. The show, I believe, should be dropping every Tuesday, so you guys can catch it in time for the waiver wire for your Fantasy's waiver. Should at least it should. The standard waiver is Wednesday.
Yeah.
That's standard waiver day. But we'll catch you guys next week. We thank you guys again for listening, and thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast as usual. And Andrew, thank you to you for joining me.
Yes, sir.
And we'll catch you guys next week. Have a good one. Peace out.
Peace.